Constitution and have the respect for the rule of law once again. We must recognize that freedom is a common thread that unites everyone, Democrats, Republicans, Independents. Free to make mistakes, free to succeed, free to marry who they want, free to live their lives how they see fit, as long as they don't hurt anyone else. Freedom without justice. We're losing our republic just a little bit each day. And I got off my duff back in 2007, and I worked my tail off, and I tried to spread the message. Let's do this. We've got some great people here. We all band together. Do a little bit. I'm just a spoke in a wheel. There's a huge wheel on one spoke. I'm just kind of doing my part. Everybody else is doing their part too. And let's get our republic back. And I hope that we don't sit back and watch our republic slip out from underneath us. And I would like to have history know that the people in this room, that if we do lose our republic, let it not be said we did nothing. Thank you very much.
Welcome, all of you. My gosh, we are so glad that you took time and made the effort to come and join us tonight. We really do appreciate it. We know some of you came from a long way, so thank you very much. You are going to be well rewarded for being here and hearing Sheriff Richard Mack. Let me just tell you briefly about Sheriff Mack. He and I kind of go back a ways. A long ways. We co-chaired Pat Buchanan's campaign in 95 and 96 here in Arizona, and that's when I really got to know Richard really well. And then since then, we've certainly worked together on various campaigns, including the recent campaign of Congressman Ron Paul, and we've done several things together that have been really interesting and a lot of fun. I want you to know that Sheriff Mack is actually the first U.S. sheriff that has ever sued the Supreme Court and won. It's really quite phenomenal. Now back there on the back table, Sheriff Mack has some books back there. He's written a lot of books that are really good. I think the one I liked the best was from my Cold Dead Fingers. Yeah. Okay, Sheriff Mack is currently the founder of Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. Now, what Sheriff Mack has been doing is going around the country, you guys. He has talked to so many sheriffs, and he's got petitions that he's got out that have over 400 sheriffs that have signed onto this petition. He is teaching them about their constitutional duty as the supreme law in each county that takes precedent over the feds. Now, your sheriffs know that. Then they will know that they can tell the feds, go take a flying leap when you come into our county and think that you're going to take any guns away from anybody that lives in my county. And that's what sheriffs have to know. Sheriff Mack is a family man. He's got 5 children. He and his lovely wife, Dawn, live down in the Gilbert area right now. And what he's going to do is come up here and give you the whole 9 yards.
Do you have to hold this, or can I put it on somewhere? Let's try it. All right. Hey, that feels like it worked. Okay. I want you to know that I just got in from Michigan this morning, and right before that I was in Illinois, and right before that I was in Missouri,
And right before that, I don't remember, but I got home at noon today, and I went home and kissed my wife and took a shower, and then New York Times called me about all this sheriff stuff. And so I was busy getting ready and to come here while I was talking to the New York Times, and they asked me kind of a weird question. They said, well, what is your feeling? I don't know if all you people know this. Are you familiar with the SPLC?
Yeah.
Southern Poverty Law Center. And that's the supposed hate group watcher for all of us. You know? And they lied about me ever since '94 when I first sued the Clinton administration when I was the sheriff in Safford in Graham County. And I've had a few friends here tonight that can verify to you that I really was the sheriff in Graham County. They grew up with me. They know. So anyway, yeah. And I hope that they'll also tell you that I was a pretty nice guy growing up in the Gila Valley. And don't ask me why the Gila Valley is in Graham County instead of Gila County, but I don't know. But anyway, I love Arizona. I'm from Arizona. And the crazy question this guy asked me was, well, the Southern Poverty Law Center kind of paints this picture of you being a radical and a fanatic and a racist. And I said, well, first of all, the people that know me knew my mother. And I want to tell you, we're here talking about Abraham Lincoln tonight, aren't we? Is this Lincoln Day dinner, Republican bill? Well, I can say the same thing that Abraham Lincoln said about his mother. All that I am, and all that I ever hope to be, I owe to my aged mother. And she didn't raise any racists in her home, did she, Captain? Everyone was welcome in our home, and we were taught not to be against anyone because of the way they looked. And I never have been, and I never will be. And when anybody questions me about whether or not I'm a racist, they're talking about my mother and my father. They didn't raise us to be that way, and we're not. And so that's how I answer all of that. But I will tell you one other thing too. Last year, you had my good friend Joe Arpaio speaking here, is that right? Well, while I was speaking in Michigan last night, I heard that he got this letter bomb, and you're all aware of that, and I saw the news during the day about it, and then he was having a press conference. When I called him, he didn't answer. That's the first time he hasn't answered my phone calls in a long time. So I said, folks, if you'll give me a minute, I'm going to try and see if I can get Joe Arpaio on the phone. And I called him, and he spoke, and so I put him on speaker, and he thanked all the people for their concern in St. John's, Michigan last night. Had a big crowd, and I have to tell you, because you're fellow Arizonans, that sometimes Joe and I speak at the same meetings, and I'm a little bit jealous that he got top billing last year, and I didn't even get invited. You know? But I appreciate you making it up to me this year. Now, Joe and I really go after each other sometimes, and I've got to tell you this. You all know that Joe wrote this crazy book called The Toughest Sheriff in America, right? Well, I wrote books before that, and in fact, he hadn't even written a book. And in fact, if anybody wants to put a bid on these cheap underwear that he signed for me, I've got underwear from 1994, maybe the beginning of 1995, where he wrote, Sheriff Mack, you write books, I sign underwear. So he hadn't written that book yet. And so I always tell him, when he and I are sharing the stage, I say, Joe, because we're friends, I'm not going to sue you. And he goes, why would you sue me? I said, because you lied on the cover of your book. And he goes, oh, you think you're the toughest sheriff in America? And I said, Joe, come on, it's really elementary. You took on the street gangs, the prostitutes, the illegal aliens, and regular criminals. I took on the Clintons. the example that Joe has set in being so creative as a sheriff and understanding one principle. If you've ever heard him talk, you've heard him say this. He said it here. I know he did, even though I wasn't here, that he wouldn't want to be sheriff if he was appointed or working for a bunch of bureaucrats or other politicians. He wants to work for you, and he has done a great job in representing the power of the sheriff to the rest of the country and sometimes to the whole world. And that's the job I really appreciate the Joe Fire. Real quickly, if you'll let me, like Karen told you, I've written several books, and I want to do a little commercial about these because right after I speak, I'll be back at the table and I'll be signing these for you. And I do that all across the country. And last night, we actually, in Michigan, we ran out of this one first. And this was my first book. And I wrote this in 1994, the very year I filed a lawsuit against the Clinton administration to stop the gun control associated with the Brady Bill. Now, a lot of you don't know this, that there was just, everybody thinks there was just this little Brady Bill thing. There were actually 5 Brady bills scheduled to be passed one year after the other until ammunition was going to be serialized and regulated out of existence. Now they're starting to do it all over again. But that first push to do that was in the Brady Bill. And it was going to be a Brady Bill 2. Howard Menzenbaum actually introduced Brady Bill 2 weeks after I filed the lawsuit. Now I was all by myself. There was nobody else in the country that had filed at that time. And then about 3 weeks later, Sheriff Prince from Montana filed the same lawsuit. And we ended up having 7 out of 3,100 that told the federal government, we're not going to do the Brady Bill here, and we're going to prove in court that you can't tell us what to do. That was the main thing. You see, when we were at a Sheriff's Association meeting on January 21st, 1994, and yes, I was the youngest sheriff in the state at the time, and the BATF comes in there and they tell all the sheriffs of Arizona, and they did this across the country, that we had to work for them for free. We had to pay for all the Brady Bill work because there was no money attached to it. Congress didn't attach any money. And if they had attached money, then would I do it? Absolutely not. They could have tried to pay me $1 million. I would have never touched this. Never. And so then they said, get this. This is all true, folks. And you can see the documentation. This little booklet here is a highlighted version of my Supreme Court victory. It's the most powerful 10th Amendment state sovereignty decision in the history of our country. And I don't want it to be withheld from you anymore. Come over to the table and you can see this, and this is a powerful tool, a very powerful tool that every county commissioner, state rep, state senator, governor, and everybody else in any type of capacity, citizens alike, citizens and government officials alike, should know what this says. It happened right here in Arizona. And then when we went to court, it was absolutely astonishing. And I have to tell you, while I'm going through the commercial of the books here, this is my most recent, The Magic of Gun Control. Don't you love that title? The Magic of Gun Control. I've actually had some people say, you support gun control? I said, no. I said, but it is magic. And they go, why is it magic? Because if it ever provided any benefit, or if it did anything good to help reduce crime or to make us safer, it would be magic. Because it's never done that in world history. Never. And yet now I invented a new word for this book, polymagician. Our polymagicians in Washington, D.C. want you to believe that they can work the magic, that somehow all the things that Hitler did, and they do the same thing, it'll be magic. And it'll be fun. Because this is America. And some interviews that I've done on TV and radio, they won't even let me say Hitler. Well, you're not allowed to make any comparisons with Hitler. And I said, what did Ben Franklin say? Those of us who refuse to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And that's what you're promoting. I said, I'll make all the analogies I want. I'll compare that. And he says, well, you shouldn't compare Hitler. I said, okay, how about Mussolini and Stalin and Fidel Castro? All right? I'll leave Hitler out of it. How about those guys? And so I got to tell you, though, when we first filed the lawsuit, the BATF came there to that meeting, and they told us that one, that we had to do the Brady Bill, they were commandeering our office for federal bidding, and that we had to pay for the whole thing, and then get this, we were subject to arrest if we failed to comply. I kid you not. And you can see it in this little book. It's a threat of arrest. It's quoted in here. And my attorney, Dave Hardy in Tucson, actually got an order of protection, an injunction order from the judge protecting me from Bill Clinton and Janet Reno. So they couldn't arrest me. And doesn't that kind of make me think of all the people that ever sued Bill Clinton? Think of all those people, those girls, those women, you know, even way back in Arkansas. You know, seriously, a sheriff, a small town sheriff from Safford, Arizona, holds the distinction. I was the only person in history to sue Bill Clinton on a non-sexual matter. It's true. Yeah. So, when we filed in district court, this thing took so many twists and turns, and I have to tell you that the district judge in Tucson sided with me on every pretrial motion. And this takes another huge twist, because I have to tell you, he's a very special Arizonan, or he was. Because Judge John M. Roll was murdered the day, on January 8th, 2011, the day that Rothman went crazy shooting at people at Safeway parking lot. The judge who first heard my case, who changed my life forever, was murdered that day, and he was practicing something that philosophically I hope that every public official will understand, and that is the theory of interposition, interpose. James Madison talked about the doctrine of local officials, especially state officials, interposing on behalf of the citizens to protect them from being victimized by the federal government. You know what that's actually the purpose of state government. And we're going to go over that in just a little bit. But there's a chapter dedicated to Judge John M. Roll in this book. And he actually said in his ruling, I want to go over 2 points to show you what kind of man he was, to show you what kind of principled judge he was. He didn't care that he was going against his own boss. He went against the people that control his salary and his position. And he actually said, Congress exceeded its authority under Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, thereby impermissibly encroaching upon the powers retained by the states, my friends, pursuant to the 10th Amendment. And it was the most powerful decision of all the judges that ever heard this case, even the ones in the Supreme Court that eventually ruled on this case also. And then Judge Roll said, and it's in this, his quote is in here, he said, Mack is thus forced to choose between keeping his oath or obeying the law, subjecting himself to possible sanctions. Well, the sanctions were against me that I could be arrested for having to choose between keeping my oath. What is my oath? And I swore in God's name that I would uphold and defend the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution of Arizona. What if politicians and legislatures come to sheriffs and say, we want you to do this even though it makes you violate your oath? Which one do you want to side with? Do you want to side with the Constitution and keep their word, or go along with politicians? I would say that would almost never be the case in Washington, D.C. Because if you're ever going along with them, then you know you're violating the Constitution. They haven't followed the Constitution in decades in Washington. So where's the solution? Where's the solution? Is there a solution? County by county and state by state, we take back our Constitution, and we take back America, and we take back our freedom and liberty, and we protect our land and freedoms. about Judge Roll. Now, It's your county commissioner's job. Anybody in government, their one job is to protect, defend, and secure life, liberty, and property. If they're not doing that, you don't need them, and you don't want them. So, and then about 1999, I wanted to get a few things off my chest, and I wrote a book called The Proper Role of Law Enforcement. And that's in there. And this details my personal conversion to the Constitution when I was a rookie cop up in Utah. I actually started my police career up there, and then I moved to Safford, back to Safford, in 1988 to run for sheriff. And I hadn't even lived here for 12 years. I'd never been a cop in Arizona. I'd never served in any type of public capacity in Grant County. And I walked back into town and said, make me your head chief law enforcement officer, make me your sheriff. Well, we worked our tails off and we won, and in 1992 I was reelected. And then 1993 is when Bill Clinton signed the Brady Bill into law. And then, of course, just January after that is when the BATF showed up. And then on February 28, 1994, is when we filed the lawsuit in district court. And I have to tell you that it just was an amazing, miraculous event for this small town boy from Safford, Arizona, to get all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Do you think I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to sue the federal government and we're going to get to the Supreme Court? And I found out, do you know the likelihood of getting any case to the Supreme Court is about 0.05. And then to win is even less. And so, I mean, the odds were totally against us. And I can just tell you, I can look back at it, and I can honestly tell you, I can see God's hand all over it. And the older I get, the more miraculous that whole thing gets. And I'll even say that to my wife sometimes. I said, I still can't believe that this happened, and I can't believe you let me do this. And I still really am shocked by that. I mean, she doesn't even want me to wear a tie that might not match, you know. And she's really strict with me on all these things. And, you know, she's short, but she gets my fanny all the time. And then now I'm taking the biggest step in my life, and we're going to ruin everything. You know, she didn't say, we got 5 kids. Are you going to worry about that? I don't know. She must have been having a bad day or something. And she totally supported this. And I can tell you honestly, without any question, I'm not kidding on this one. She made the decision. She really did. And we didn't call together, I didn't call Karen and a bunch of other politicians in the state. Do you think this will help me run for governor? Or can I run for Congress? Or is this going to help my career? Or I can stay in office like Joe Arpaio has forever. And there was none of that. There was no political motive in any of this. And that's what I beg that you learn from all of this, is that we stop using politics and stop caring about what tomorrow is, or that I'm going to protect my job, or you know, this, I just want to stay in office longer, or my political career. If that's all politicians and Republicans are concerned about, then we're going to continue to lose. And if the Republican Party isn't the Constitution Party, then we're going to continue to lose. And let me tell you right now, you look at what's going on in our country. We have sheriffs standing against Barack Obama and his gun control. And we have them standing against governors. And you can look at my website. Go to CSPOA. CISPOA. Sorry, I didn't work out the acronym good enough. Okay? But it stands for Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. You can see over 410 sheriffs who have signed on, gone public and said, I'm not going to support this gun control. I won't go along. And like the sheriffs in Utah said, we will not tolerate the federal government trying to make criminals out of law-abiding citizens in our counties. And all of this started because 4.5 years ago, I wrote this crazy little book called The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope. And then This thing went viral. It's done about 170,000 copies nationwide, and it was just self-published. I actually had a publisher who wanted to do it, and he was ticking me off. He was taking too long, and I fired him, and I just did it myself. And so this book just went crazy. And it was because of people like you, and people were selling it in their stores, and there's somebody here that was selling it in their stores, and then others did it, and then Gun Owners of America put it on their website, and Alex Jones put it on his, and then other people, and I couldn't keep up with the request for speaking about this, because you know why? It's a solution. It is the solution. It's the only one we have left, and it's all based on one fundamental principle. And on the very first page, I quote Jefferson. He said, "When all government shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, it will render powerless the checks provided and become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated." End quote. In other words, it'll be just as bad as King George III, that snotty-nosed little punk from England, and he was really young, and he just did what his advisor told him, so he was doing all these cruel and unusual things to us. And it's going to be just as bad as that if we allow this all government to be drawn to Washington. My question to you, and I want you to ask your county attorneys and all these other learned attorneys across the country that have been disagreeing with this and telling their sheriffs that they have to do what the federal government tells them. I'm getting county attorneys doing that all the time. And I'm going to tell you, every county attorney, I don't care if one's in this room, and I don't care if you've done it, you're either a fool or a liar. First of all, who formed the federal government? We did. The 13 original colonies formed the federal government. And you're trying to tell me that they said, yeah, we want to form a new, we just fought 7.5 years to get rid of King George III, and we want to do it again, but we want just a bunch of them now. That isn't what happened. And the Constitution was specifically designed to prevent ever those abuses happening again. And that was the purpose of the Constitution, to limit and make government impotent. And Article 1, Section 8 gives 17 assignments to the federal government in the Constitution. And in my decision, you're not going to believe this, that it actually says this. Justice Scalia wrote this decision, and he said, quote, "State legislatures are not subject to federal direction." Don't you wish your state legislature knew that? Federal direction. This was a case done right here in Arizona. Okay? Let's look at it a little. And then, the very next page, Scalia reinforces that and says, what do you think, when I read this to you, what do you think this does to Obamacare? Would you like to get rid of Obamacare? You know how to get rid of Obamacare? You know how to get rid of all the abuses in Washington, not just Obamacare? County by county and state by state. That's how. Forget Washington. It's bought and paid for, and it's so corrupt there that if God doesn't strike him down, he owes Sodom and Gomorrah an apology. You know? Get this. This is from the U.S. Supreme Court. Mack Prince versus U.S. The federal government, we held, may not compel the states to enact or administer a federal regulatory program. What does that do to Obamacare? If we want to get rid of it, we can, because we don't have to. Okay? And now what are they trying to do, though? Pay billions of dollars to Arizona, so they'll go ahead and do it. Yep. Come on. We got a lot of money for you, Jan. Come on, Jan. Take that money, Jan. Take that money. The first state that learns to stop sending money to Washington, D.C., that's where I'm moving.
Yeah.
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 Listen to her. She keeps telling me to run for governor.
Yes.
Let's get to the point here, friends. This decision goes 10 times further to the 10th power than what I just read you. Now, some of you might be thinking, yeah, he said, the decision said state legislatures are not subject to federal direction, but cities and counties are. They're subdivisions of the state, thank you. And Scalia even says that twice in the decision. And so I'll go back to the end where he actually makes the point, the order of the court. And he says, the federal government may neither issue directives requiring the states to address particular problems, nor command the state's officers or those of their political subdivisions. Counties, cities, what's another political subdivision I didn't mention? School boards. Absolutely. They do not belong to the federal government. Oh, we have all these federal mandates. No, you don't. Tell them to stop. Tell them to get out of your county. Tell them to leave you alone. And then they're run by Washington. Boy, that's another reason why we should get rid of the Department of Education, like Ronald Reagan told us. Now back to Abraham Lincoln. Let's let him review and summarize some of this for us, okay? I loved a lot of things he said. He wasn't right on everything, but I love some of the things he said. And he really was talking to us today, I think, in a lot of the things he said. First of all, the Gettysburg Address. That our forefathers brought forth on this continent and the nation. Dedicated to the principle and the notion that we're all created equal. And you know what that brings up to me? And I even taught and talked about this with that reporter from New York Times today. I said, what about Rosa Parks? She was arrested on December 1st, 1955 because she didn't give her seat to a white man. She broke the law. It was the law, not just a tradition. 2 cops came and handcuffed her and took her to jail. She was fingerprinted and photographed like we do everybody we arrest. And her booking sheet, I wonder what it said. Didn't give her seat to a white man. My dear friends, we have to know and understand. We should have never heard of Rosa Parks. You know why? Because we should have heard of the constitutional guards, the 2 cops, or maybe the sheriff and his deputy that went up to Rosa Parks and said, "Ma'am, what seems to be the problem here?" And she looked up scared to death because she knows this could be a lynching. And she says, "Why can't we just be left alone?" Anybody else ever feel like that? Yeah, me too. And so she says, "Why can't we be left alone?" This is how history should have said it. This is how history should have played it. And this sheriff sits down next to her and he goes, "You know what? Mrs. Parks, you're right. And it would be an honor for my deputy and me to escort you home safely." And that's the difference. That's who you want as a sheriff today. Someone who knows their obligation to keep their oath and to protect people from stupid laws. And to keep their word and protect and defend the God-given rights of every citizen. And we were based on equality, and yet she's going to jail for not complying with the stupid law that said she had to get to the back of the bus. Is the government trying to put people at the back of the bus today? How about gun owners? You know, recently I saw a movie, and I hope all of you have seen it. But it had a song in there, and these are the lyrics. Do you hear people sing? Singing the song of angry men. It is the music of a people who will not be slaves again. And which of our founding fathers talked about this enslaving thing? Well, just about all of them. But George Mason specifically addressed it and related it to the right to keep and bear arms. He said, quote, "I asked her, what is the militia? It is the whole body of the people. To disarm the people is the best and most effectual way to enslave them. And so now you know why we get a little bit itchy and antsy when they start talking about gun control, and they start talking about registration, and they're talking about ammunition registration, and any registration should scare you to death. Why? Because we learn from history. Every time. No exceptions. England did it, Australia did it, Canada did it. All those communist dictators did it. There was first registration, and then always confiscation. And I don't want any of you to leave this room tonight making a mistake that some of us have been making. That, yeah, we don't vote for any of that, but we do support this universal background check. My dear friends, not ever. Why? Oh, it might be a good idea. No, statistical analysis doesn't make it constitutional, does it? Remember what Judge Roll said? Remember what he said? And the worst thing is that you would allow anybody in the state, or as even worse, in Washington, to tell you, the president can tell you, if you don't submit, or subject yourself, or enslave yourself, and do what we tell you to get a background check, our version of the check, without any checks and balances, by the way, you submit to that check, or you don't get to exercise your Second Amendment rights. Does that bother anybody? It does me. Don't ever support that. They're saying now that 92% of Americans support that. It's not a popularity contest. My freedom is not up to a poll. And neither is yours. I really like this quote from Lincoln, and we're going to close real quick here. Lincoln said, "America will never be destroyed from the outside." I totally believe that. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroy ourselves. My dear friends, I think this is very appropriate to be talking about the president during the Civil War, because we are now in the most critical stage of American history since the Civil War. We are the generation that is deciding right now whether or not we're going to continue as a constitutional, God-given republic, or we're going to be just another socialistic republic, or even worse, socialistic democracy. I challenge you, Fitzgerald, Dave, why did I draw a blank there? Dave challenged us to look things up. I'm going to tell you to look this up. Look up the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, then email me at sheriffmack@hotmail.com and tell me how many we're not already doing in this country. Of the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, tell me how many we're not doing. It'll be a very short email. But you tell me how many we're not doing. And then tell me that America is okay. And then tell me and ask me why I started an association that now is building the defenses, building the barriers. James Madison said this about your state: "We can safely rely on the disposition of state legislatures to erect barriers." And remember, political subdivisions are part of this. Counties, cities, school boards, everyone, to, in this state, erect the barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. If your state and county and city legislature is not erecting the barriers, then they're not doing their job.